60s called Themes of State. Basically the Christ image, but also many images similar to it. When he wrote the essay, the world was in anything but the kind of condition it was now. In the mid-60s, you might remember, the main religious issues on the horizon were the fresh memories of fascist paganism and communist atheism. That was the religious obsession of the time, not a global Christian crusade. So Shapiro, in a way, his essay on this potent image was like a message in a bottle. I remember reading it in graduate school and thinking, maybe someday there will be a use for this, and it came back to me the minute I saw the Abu Ghraib images. It was built on a series of relationships that are foundational to the interpretation of images as such. I mean, very simple relationships. The first is simply the relation of an image to a text that it illustrates, and closely connected to that, the relation of literal and symbolic meanings in both image and text, that is the literal and the figurative. The second is the formal distinction between frontal and profile renderings of the human figure and their association with the implied address of an image, as an I facing a you, a spectator, or what the linguist von Venist called first-person and third-person addresses of a picture. And a simple illustration of this is the difference between the iPod and the iRack icon. The iPod icons are what Shapiro would call themes of action. They are in the third person. They are oblivious to us. They're self-absorbed. Whereas the iRack figure seems to face us. Now Shapiro went on to analyze the way this figure appeared throughout the history of Christian iconography and before that. Beginning with the figure of Moses raising his arms at the battle of the Israelites with the Amalekites. This is from Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. It shows Moses on a mountaintop, his arms raised, his arms supported by his general and his priest Aaron and Hur, while down in the valley below, the Israelites, led by Joshua, are fighting the Amalekites. As the story goes in the Bible, as long as Moses holds his arms up, the Israelites prevail. But when he begins to get tired and lowers his arms, the Amalekites prevail. So Aaron and Hur stand there holding his arms up. Moses is the head of the state, and the head, as you'll see, is going to become a very crucial figure to all of this mythology, but also the arms. A head of state has ministers who are his arms, who are, and when he uses force of arms, we understand the metaphor as it were literalized in the picture of the sovereign. Here's Honorius's analysis of this picture. In it are represented the sacrifice. Sorry, this is actually the next picture. In it are represented the sacrifice of the highest pontiff in the battle of the King of Glory. Moses prefigured it. This is why we pray this way. Moses prefigured it when he prayed on the mountain with outstretched hands, while Joshua, who is Jesus, fought with Amalek, and devastated the kingdom of the defeated enemy and brought back his people joyous in victory. Thus Christ on the Mount of the Cross prayed with outstretched hands for the unbelieving and denying people, and as a victorious leader. He fought under the standard of the cross against Amalek, that is, the devil, and laid waste his conquered kingdom and defeated the evil enemy. Many different kinds of images are condensed into the figure with the outstretched arms, from the portrayal of Moses to a figure of an orant like this, a praying or oratorical figure from the catacombs, to Daniel in the lion's den, to pagan figures of deities with their arms outstretched, sometimes supported by their ministers, as in this Hittite relief, all the way down to the depiction of Christian sovereigns such as Henry II, whose images display the same analogy of the king to Christ through his posture as a cross, and to Moses through the supporting bishop saints. The role of Moses is described at one point to the ruler and at another to the priest. Both are at the same time religious and secular powers in close alliance with each other. Now, it should be clear from this analysis that Shapiro regards the theme of state not merely as a formal matter of figural stasis and frontality in the address of the image, but as a key resource for the portrayal of religious and political sovereignty. It's also clear that Shapiro's way of moving from the literal to the symbolic meaning of these themes of state is cumulative and historically reversible. Later versions of an image seem to remember earlier versions, recuperating and transforming them at the same time, so that the figures of Aaron and Hur, the supporting ministers of Moses, can disappear from the scene in order to stress the absolutely independent, autonomous power of the sovereign, as in the figure of Hobbes' Leviathan, where the hands of the monarch control the sword of secular violence and the shepherd's crook of religious care for the safety of the people. But equally important is the reverse historical reading, which looks back to the representation of Moses as a prefiguration of Christ and attributes the victory over the Amalekites to the divine power of the Christological gesture, as if Jesus is already there. It's not only that the symbolic meanings accumulate as an image moves forward in history, but that its new meanings have the effect of reframing the past and rendering temporality and narrative themselves as a simultaneous tableau. The theme of state renders history as an eternal static image that is unchanging in its basic form, at least as unchanging as the human form itself, even as its full meaning is unfolded in new images to come in a promised apocalyptic future when the Messiah will return to earth in triumph. Moses' victory over the Amalekites, in other words, does not only prefigure the first coming of Christ to offer himself as a sacrifice, but also his second coming as the conquering sovereign of the Last Judgment. Well, I hope this now makes it somewhat clear why the figure of the hooded man became the universally recognizable icon of the entire Abu Ghraib archive. At the formal level, this frontally posed figure, like the figures of prayer Shapiro invokes, faces the viewer directly. The static character of the theme of state is reinforced further by its positioning on a pedestal, which makes it clear that action or movement is precluded, that absolute stillness was required to maintain the position. The stasis of the image is further reinforced by its symmetry and contrasted color scheme. It makes a simple and singular impression as a black diamond-shaped form against a light background, a form that can be instantly recognized from a distance, even passing by it on the freeway or seeing it among a flood of other kinds of images. It makes a simple and singular impression. The hood covering the face renders the figure even more abstract and anonymous. It could be any Iraqi, or for that matter, any suspected terrorist captured by the U.S. military in Afghanistan at Guantanamo Bay, since this image is a direct result of the orders to Gitmoize Abu Ghraib, the orders brought by General Jeffrey Moore. So we know that this kind of thing was going on. The only difference was through one of those great accidents and the luck of history, this photograph was taken from this angle and circulated into the world. It was also taken from about 5 other angles, none of which would have become iconic. So there's a great deal of contingency in the appearance of this image. As for who is under the hood, it could be any Iraqi. The true identity of the man on the box has been in dispute since the image first appeared, and there have been a number of candidates who come forward. He was first identified by Newsweek in July of 2004